I'm having a lot of fun with this So Many Christmas Carols series, but I'll admit that the selection of Christmas carols thus far has been a little odd, in the sense that the only straight takes on the story I've reviewed have been the Mickey Mouse version and the 1970 musical version, and even those ones obviously have their own gimmicks. Today I'm going to look into one of the most popular versions of the story, regarded as a true Christmas classic starring Alastair Sim, which does not feature any singing, dancing, or cartoon characters. This 1951 movie was originally released in the UK as Scrooge, and as A Christmas Carol in the US. Since it was produced in the UK, I'm going to refer to it as Scrooge. Scrooge is a mostly straightforward adaptation, with a few changes that are so well done that they almost feel as if they came from the original book. We'll get to that shortly. At front and center is Alastair Sim as Ebenezer Scrooge himself. Sim plays the role wonderfully, and might be one of the best Scrooges I've ever seen. When he's in his greedy miser mode, he's not a bellowing, shouting Scrooge as some have portrayed him, but a bitter, broken old man with a sarcastic sense of humor. He really does seem as solitary as an oyster, as Dickens narrated. Then, when the Christmas spirits try to make him into a better person, he is hesitant, not out of anger, but seems afraid to change, scared he isn't capable of doing so.
I'm too old and beyond hope. Go and redeem some younger, more promising creature. Leave me to keep Christmas in my own way.
Of course, the point of A Christmas Carol is that there is hope for everyone, and when Scrooge finally does embrace the goodness of humanity, his joy is truly contagious. He leaps, he dances, he laughs, he scares the heck out of his housekeeper, in a scene that was later paid homage to in the Zemeckis version. In other words, Sim plays Scrooge perfectly. The rest of the players are no slouches either, but Sim was the standout to me, as Scrooge really should be. I feel a little bad I'm not talking more about the actors or their backgrounds, but as an ignorant American born in the early 90s, I don't know much about British films from the 50s. A lot of these actors have extensive credits, and no doubt played their other roles wonderfully, but for example, Hermione Baddeley, who played Mrs. Cratchit, she's been nominated for an Academy Award and a Tony, and has had tons of credits over the years, but I only know her as one of the maids from Mary Poppins and as the shrew from The Secret of Nim. That's about it, so for fans of British cinema of yesteryear, I apologize. Regarding the script, most of the changes are in the Christmas Past sequence, and they really breathe some nice life into what I often find to be the least interesting part of the story. Despite taking up nearly half an hour of this 90-minute film, the past sequence definitely holds up pretty well. I guess I always like the supernatural stuff more myself. With Marley and Christmas Yet to Come, you get a lot of cool, moody, ghostly imagery. With Christmas Present, you have a fun character who, depending on your version, has a pair of skeleton kids hiding under his cloak. Christmas Past is mostly about Scrooge's bummer of a childhood. It's important, and often downright essential to the plot, but it can be a bit of a snooze if not done right. Thankfully, here it is most definitely done right. Several scenes are added, including Scrooge meeting Marley and their boss, a new character named Mr. Jorkin, who more or less added to young Ebenezer's initial corruption. An emotional scene has Scrooge visiting his sister Fan on her deathbed, having just given birth to her son, Fred. Fan was pretty much one of the only bright spots in Scrooge's life, which is where his resentment toward his nephew comes from, even though it obviously wasn't the kid's fault in the slightest. But the kicker is, as Scrooge is leaving, Fan weakly calls out for him to take care of Fred. Something past Scrooge didn't hear, but present Scrooge does. Yet another scene with Scrooge at a deathbed comes with Jacob Marley dying. As Scrooge looms over him in the dark, murky chambers, Marley chokes out a warning to Scrooge that they were both wrong. Scrooge brushes it off coldly and leaves. These scenes were great at adding to Scrooge's character and backstory, and really feel authentic to the source material. Major kudos to the screenwriter Noel Langley, who interestingly enough worked on the first draft of the 1939 classic Wizard of Oz. Reportedly, there were many changes made to that Wizard of Oz script that he was unhappy with, and while he was apparently able to veto a few of them, he was never quite satisfied with the final product. Relatively speaking, this is a rather dark version of A Christmas Carol, which is fine since it's a rather dark story. However, before this, the two main talky Christmas Carol films were relatively lighthearted. The 1935 version had some nice juxtaposition of the rich and poor of London early on, but not much else to my recollection. The 1938 version was downright cheerful by comparison, omitting or glossing over a good deal of the bleak aspects of the story. In this Christmas Carol, on the other hand, this was one of the first, if not the first version, to show the rest of the wandering spirits, other than Jacob Marley, who travel the world wishing they could do good, but are powerless to. This is also the first time, to my knowledge, that we see Ignorance and Want, the starving waifs who accompany Christmas Present. Perhaps because of this, reviews were mixed when the film came out, with some critics not liking its gloomy tone. Despite not performing well on its initial release in the US, the movie has been regarded as a classic in modern times and is often seen as one of the best adaptations of Dickens' ghostly tale. The fact that it was rerun often on TV probably helped it as well. While talking about the best versions of A Christmas Carol, 3 films are often brought up the most. This one, the 1984 version with George C. Scott, and The Muppet Christmas Carol. While my vote on the best is firmly with The Muppets, I do like the Alastair Sim version quite a bit. It hits all the beats perfectly, the actors are great, they have a good script to work with. I understand why this often makes the top Christmas lists. In our next Christmas Carol review, we're looking at the other time Alastair Sim performed his Scrooge role, and it is beautiful.